Hey, welcome to the Black Knight Nation podcast. I'm your host, Sal Interdonato. We are brought to you by Higher Echelon as always. We appreciate Higher Echelon and Joe Ross sponsoring this podcast. Thanks so much for joining us. I've been slacking a little bit on the podcast front, but we had Brian Riley this week before his last regular season home hockey game for Army. 33 years of Brian Riley at Army, 21 as the head coach. I was at his last game last night. Man, it was a great atmosphere. They won 3-2. I'm going to write something on the day, soon, very soon, probably tonight or tomorrow. But just I don't know if you guys have ever met Brian Riley, but the guy is an absolute class act. It was just a great moment. A lot of his former captains were there. His family was there. His brother, who coached at Army, was there. Just great moment. I got a chance to sit at Tate Rink for the first time I ever taken an Army hockey game. And we got to hold this podcast up for a second. We have Noah Short watching right now. Army slotback Noah Short. Noah, we appreciate you. Thanks a lot, Noah, for watching. We really appreciate you. Thanks for popping on. We're going to break down the beginning of spring practice coming up on Thursday. Noah and his teammates will be out at my House Field for the spring practice. Thanks so much, Noah. Guys, if you're watching now, we are now monetized. The Black Knight Nation on YouTube is now monetized. So if you comment below, there's an option to send us a super chat. If you want to support Black Knight Nation and what we're doing and what we're providing to Army sports fans, we would really appreciate that. Just wanted to get that out. Welcome Cuthbert from Sidelines Army and also Seth Mendelson of Black Knight Nation. It's been a while. Just wanted to talk a little football. Things have happened in between the end of the season. We never did an end of the season kind of podcast, like a wrap. Seth, that's my bad. I kind of felt bad about that, So I'm like, but as the weeks and the days progressed, I'm like, what? Just family stuff, life stuff, and they get a chance to do it. But maybe we could talk a little bit about it now. There's been some coaching changes on the staff. Of course, we knew that Matt Drinkall was leaving to be the Central Michigan head coach. We kind of knew he was bringing Sean Cronin, the defensive line coach, to be his defensive coordinator. Army hires 2 assistant coaches in January, Nate Farquhar for his defensive line and Chandler Burks to be its tight ends coach. That's changed. Nate Farquhar is no longer at West Point. He's at Kentucky as an analyst. He's now been hired. And that happened a couple weeks ago. I apologize, Black Knight Nation, for not being on top of that a little bit more. So Nate Farquhar is on Kentucky staff. So Army has a defensive line kind of opening. I think the coach has been hired, but they haven't announced it yet because the paperwork, human resources paperwork, so to speak. And Chandler Burks is now going to be the running backs coach for Army, not the tight ends coach. And they brought in a new tight ends coach, Seth Hethnis, I believe his name is. He comes from Tennessee State, and he has some GA background at Minnesota and Liberty. So he's been at the FBS level as a graduate assistant, and so he'll be the tight ends coach. And tight ends is a position where they're really young at Army, so it should be interesting with him. We might as well get right to it, right? Do you guys think the quarterback depth chart could change? Any chance Washington jumps to number 2 before the season starts? We might as well talk about spring practice that starts on Thursday. And the big question heading into the spring is who replaces Bryson Daly, right, guys? I mean, Bryson Daly was, incredible season. When you finish 5th in Heisman, when you have set the NCAA record for by quarterbacks for touchdowns in the season, that's a season for the ages for Army football as an individually. And now you got who's next, right? And Seth, you want to give your thoughts on it? I mean, we'll roll through the candidates. Dwayne Coleman will be a senior this year. Dwayne had that start against Air Force, and he won that Air Force game when Bryson sat out. You have Ethan Washington, who's a freshman. If you're looking just for physical tools, Ethan's probably tops on the list, right? You have Cale Helms, who's going to be, I believe, a junior, Cale Helms, who saw some, when they were ahead of teams late in games, he saw some action. Here's somebody that's back, Zach Mundell. Zach Mundell did not play last year. He left West Point due to an injury. He's back this year. He's a guy who's kind of floated between quarterback and slot receiver, slot back. And so Zach Mundell is going to be in the mix also in the spring. So those are basically your 4 candidates. So now we'll see. Well, we like to welcome another Army player watching this podcast. I'll get to in a second. Cody Harris Miller. Thanks, Cody. Thanks so much for watching Army's starting nose tackle. We appreciate that so much. Yeah, Seth, give us your thoughts on. I'm going to shut up. Seth, please give us your thoughts on the quarterback situation.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, I think the quarterback position is wide open. You got big shoes to fill with Bryson Daly graduating, and I think everybody is going to be looked at come this week. Starting this week. And we may not know who the starting quarterback at West Point is until sometime in late August, because I'm sure the coaches are looking at everything. The offense was built for Bryson Daly. It worked, worked very well. And I think they want to get somebody who is going to be as similar as you can get. And, as I said before, big shoes to fill. So I think it's wide open. I don't think anybody has an edge. I don't care what anybody says going in, that they played a couple of games. I don't see it. I saw Zach a couple of years ago. I liked what I saw there. But he was out. He was gone for a year. So I don't know. I don't know much about these younger guys. I'll be up there on Thursday. I'll be watching. I'll go to some spring practices and see what I see. But like I said, wide open, as are a couple other positions. But quarterback's the most important one at this point.
No doubt. Cuthbert, what are your early thoughts on quarterback? I know we're just heading into spring. It's February, So.
Well, there's nothing better than blind conjecture. You know what I mean? I mean, that's what greases the wheels here in sports talk. Dwayne Coleman is obviously the heir apparent. He got the most playing time behind Bryson last year. I don't think he's obviously not built the way Bryson was in terms of running the offense. But I think especially after that Air Force game, I can't remember if it was T-Rob or maybe it was Kanye. I can't remember who it was who stopped the press conference to give praise to the leadership that Coleman had shown throughout the week. It's very interesting with Zach Mundell coming back. Was it last year or 2 years ago we had a situation like that where there was a quarterback who had played on the team and then left for a year or two and had come back? I don't think that's him again, but maybe it is. But what I'm curious to see is
he's been injured a lot. He's fought injuries and he got on the field a little bit, but not necessarily. I'm not sure if he's ever taken a quarterback snap at Army. I could be wrong. I'm not sure if he has.
Okay.
Yeah.
But what I'm curious to see is if this year we go back to something that we've seen in recent past where we have more of a quarterback room. I'm thinking back to the years when we had Tyler and Jabari Laws and Christian Anderson, and we had multiple seasons where we really did have a little bit more of a revolving door at quarterback. And the old adage is if you have 2 quarterbacks, then really you have no quarterbacks. We were, I think, able to actually outperform that. And we had quarterbacks who were able to come in. They weren't being selfish. They were able to sort of run their plays effectively, and they could be used in different ways, in different packages. I don't know if we're going to see that again, but given how seemingly wide open it is, I think that's something that could be interesting to see. I don't know how interested Worley would be in doing that. I know that was obviously under a previous offensive coordinator's administration, but might be something to think about.
Yeah, real quick on the quarterback situation with Ethan Washington, right, a freshman. I guess I'm going to share this. When after the Tulane win, celebrations on the field, and we're on the field. I'm taking video here, photos here, whatever, and I walked past Cody Worley, the offensive coordinator, and he was talking to Ethan Washington, saying, "You're next." That's just, in the celebration of the moment, maybe. But Ethan Washington has a lot of talent. And I think that he's a guy where you might have to tinker with the offense a little bit to play to his strengths. You may not run the same offense that you ran with Bryson Daly with Ethan Washington. It'll be similar. I mean, they're not going to go crazy and change it and go to a shotgun offense like they did 2 years ago, but there might be they're going to play to the starting quarterback's strengths, simple as that. And Ethan's a good
What
athlete.
is Ethan Washington's, what's his stats, size wise? What is his height? And
I don't know. He's a decent sized kid, probably like 6'2".
Per the website, he's 6'1", 193.
Yeah, I mean, for Army, that's a taller kid. I mean, Bryson was about 6 foot, right ish, and I don't know. We'll see. And I will real quick. I want to put another name into the fold now. Who knows? Coming from prep school, but Bryson Luther is the prep school quarterback that the staff, I'm told, really likes. So we'll see if a freshman can jump into the mix, like maybe a couple of years back when, you had Champ Harris and you had Larry Robinson 2-3 on the depth chart. You never know. This could be another year like that. So let's get real quick. Christian, we appreciate your comments here, guys. Please keep your comments coming in. We'll answer your questions. We'll try to get to, I don't know if we'll go position by position, but we'll do our best here. Christian wants to know, can you talk about the running back and slot 3 deep and any prepsters and plebes that might get a look? We might as well talk about fullback. Kanye Udo is at Arizona State. He went through the transfer portal. He left after the AAC championship game. Hayden Reed stepped up as the fullback in the bowl game and had a 100-yard game, and certainly looked like the Hayden Reed when he was playing that position, And I think that I was talking to, I was at West Point yesterday. My daughter and I, we went to a triple header, women's basketball, women's lacrosse, and hockey in all one day. We got our fill of Army athletics. And, this see people talk to a little bit about the team. And Hayden Reed's going to be a really key player coming up this year. I mean, he's got the experience playing the position, and he's going to be the man. He's going to have to be the number one guy at the B-back position. And you look at who's behind him, Jake Rendina, right? Jake Rendina is going to be a junior who was really, really excelled in blocking for Army, right? He was a good blocking back, a guy that Bryson Daly could follow. And then Carson Smith is a junior who got some playing time late in games. Those are probably your top 3 right now. I think a guy to watch is Tim Kluska, who was a freshman who didn't get on the field much this year, but just in his freshman year. He's out of Michigan, I think the Detroit area. I believe he was maybe committed to Air Force in the past or was recruited by Air Force. Pretty good. His brother's a offensive lineman, left, I believe, Central Michigan to come to Army, believe it or not, as a transfer, one of the rare transfers. So I think those are the 4 guys at the B-back position. Cuthbert, why don't you give us your thoughts there with who Army has back and what the spring's setting up? So,
well, I think the big 4 that we're going to see on the field, not necessarily in terms of carries, but I think the big 4 in terms of snaps, it's going to be just like you said, Sal. It's going to be Reed, Rendina. Samari Howard is coming back. Is that right?
He's a slot back. Yeah, he's a slot back.
Right. Slot back, right? And then obviously Noah Short as well, but same deal, sort of running back, slot back. And then what I could see this year happening is, because Army always has a laundry list of running backs, I think it's going to be a sort of, we're going to put a guy in and see what he can do. And, we're probably not going to know anything by the end of Tarleton State, but I would think that once we're 3, 4, 5 games into the season, we're going to start to see people come around to who we're going to be getting leaned on for those second and third rotations. I can't go deep enough into those positions to give anything meaningful. But other than just that Army has such a deep next man up mentality. And I think that you're going to see, especially now that we don't have Daly, his shoes are hard to fill, 1, because he was such a tremendous runner, but 2, it was just his knowledge of the offense. And so, to your point, Sal, earlier, that whoever is going to be playing quarterback, whether it's going to be Coleman or Helms or Washington, you name it. We're going to have to be tweaking a little bit in terms of our play calling. And I think that's going to trickle down to the running backs as well. And so it's going to have to be a little bit of a wait and see. But obviously, I think Reed's going to be doing the big workload. Rendina, tremendous blocker. I think he could definitely do a little bit of work in terms of his carries. But with Udo gone, I think he's probably going to be getting more. He's going to be getting those dives and maybe a couple of traps. So I don't know. I'm excited.
Yeah. Who might think it real quick, Seth, before we get to you? David Clerk is a guy who got some action in some games. He's going to be a junior. He's a guy who will be in the slot back mix also. You think about the slot back position, and Miles Stewart played a lot of snaps he doesn't show up in the stats, Miles Stewart, but he played a lot of snaps at slot back, graduating senior, and was a really good blocker for Army last year, who really helped Rice and Daly on the edge on some of those bigger runs. So it's not just all about yards gained. You want the big plays from the slot backs when you can. Having Noah back really helps, right, Seth? I mean, having Noah Short back, he's a nice weapon to have back. When you have Hayden Reed and Noah Short, that along with whoever's the starting quarterback, it's nice building blocks. It's not what they had last year, but Noah's been a big play guy for Army.
Well, I was just about to say that. Noah Short's going to be an important guy, as he was this past year. The guy, he's on the video right now, so he knows. He started out as a safety, right? Now he moved to the offense, and boy, I wonder if Noah can pass the ball. Maybe we can put him at quarterback.
I don't know if he can. I don't know if he can.
I don't know either. I think the key thing we got to talk about is the offensive line. We have 2 guys back and 3 guys gone, and the offensive line did a sensational job for Army this past year. Sensational job. Who's going to replace those 3 guys? And I think a couple of the backups are going too. So we got to look at that's a very important thing to consider. It's as important as the quarterback is. I agree with you guys. I think we're safe at the running back positions, but the quarterback and then the offensive line. Who are they? Who's gonna step up?
Well, and Seth, another big thing, especially about the offensive line, these are the 2024 Joe Moore Award winners. This was the number 1 offensive line in the country. Not only are we losing 3 of our 5 starters, one of whom, Connor Finucane, was, he was a 5th-year guy, more starts than anyone in Army football history. That's a lot of leadership. That's a lot of experience we're losing. We're also, by the way, losing the offensive line coach who helped get us to that award. As he goes to Central Michigan, we wish him all the best, Matt Drinkle. But
one of the offensive line coaches, because
one of the offensive line, right?
Yeah.
Mike Vidi's coming back. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And then Chester Blackshear, who in 2024 was a tight ends coach. He's going to be an assistant offensive line coach, at least per the website. I mean, take it for what it's worth. So it's both going to be replacing the players themselves, and then also just about, who's leading them. I have the utmost faith that Jeff Monken is going to be able to pull another rabbit out of his hat. I think he's building his coaching tree incredibly well. He pulls people out of places you've never heard of. And, I trust the process, but it is definitely going to be an adjustment.
Yeah, Jeff Generali, thanks so much. I believe that is Paolo Generali's dad. Thanks so much for joining us today, and I appreciate the comment. Will Jeffcoat was a guy who probably could have jumped in there and did jump in. He was the backup that got the most reps last year for Army. He is a guy who was coming back last year off a knee injury, but looked really, really good. Coaches said a lot of good things about Will Jeffcoat. He started his sophomore year, I believe, or even he has starting experience. So he's going to be a guy that's you could probably plug in at a guard position, no doubt. You have Brady Small at center. Yeah, Paolo Generali at guard. Paolo Generali is a guy that I think can also switch out to tackle if you need him too. You got to find you got to find 2 starting tackles, right? You don't have Lucas Scott or Connor Finucane anymore. You got to find who are going to be those guys. And I don't know if it's in the cards for Powell to move out to tackle, but maybe that gets looked at. You have Braden Bartosh, who's going to be a senior, who's got some reps in a reserve role. Maybe he's a guy. He's more of an interior guy, but can he get into the mix? He's another guy. maybe they go young. I know they've talked. I've got to look it up and down the roster. I don't know every player by heart yet, but there was a freshman that Army talked that Jeff Monken talked really well about. Henry Appleton's a guy. He's going to be a junior. He's a guy who was the second string offensive tackle last year. He's a guy who will be in the mix at offensive tackle. Here we go. Really 3 offensive linemen back with Jeff Coat, and Appleton is looking good at tackle. He's a guy that I want to mention too. There's a freshman, if I can get to it. The roster here at my phone is loading up very slowly. But it's key. I mean, you got to have, but Cuthbert, you talked about the offensive line, Seth, the mentality of the offensive line, the room of the offensive line. They've been the mob. They've been known as a mob back to Brent Davis days, right? But 2024, they took it to the next level. And let's see if the, that room can, the guys that were in that room under the experienced players can take that next step. I think they're ready. I think that they usually find guys that are they going to play at a level of a Connor Finucane who had 50 something starts from the jump? Maybe not, but I think it's definitely something to watch. Seth, you got to be watching that offensive line for us first practice, because you're going to
I'll be right on that. Hopefully it won't be too cold.
Yeah, we don't talk about wide receivers. I'm going to find more offensive linemen in a second. I know there's a player that I want to talk about real quick on that's a tackle prospect. Wide receivers we don't talk about a lot, or tight ends, but Casey Reynolds graduating, right? I mean, that's key. That was Bryson Daly's favorite wide receiver target. You look at who's back. Liam Fortner certainly has game experience. He's certainly elite blocker as a wide receiver. Who's going to catch the balls for wide receiver when they throw the ball, if they throw the ball? Toby Alawale is a guy who played 2 years ago, had a pretty good role 2 years ago. I don't know if there was injury last year where they just went with different sets where they didn't really use a lot of receivers last year. They rarely went. If they went 3 wide receivers deep, it was Cam Shore, most of the time. So Toby Alawale is a guy definitely to watch. And tight ends, you lose David Crossan. And David Crossan may have only caught 1 pass last year, but he was certainly involved in, second level blocking, downfield blocking. He was very good at that. And, see where they go from there. Parker Pelosi played a lot, actually. He was the second string tight end last year, so he's back. And Toby was hurt early. So that's thank you, Mr. Generelli. Appreciate that. So Alawale is a guy that he made plays his freshman year. He can be a guy in their offense that can be the Casey Reynolds, fill that void for Casey Reynolds. Tight end, they have a bunch of young guys. Tex Brennan is a freshman that saw some playing time late in the season. Pryor is a guy. I mean, they have a bunch of freshman players at those positions and sophomores that are next up. Army will run 2 tight end sets a lot, right, Cuthbert? I mean, they will bring in that second tight end when they want to smash mouth the football. So they're gonna use those guys. That could be a nice. It's a low key position to watch in the spring, tight end.
I think that looking at last year, Bryson Daly wasn't doing a tremendous amount of passing. When he was, obviously he was Casey Reynolds, to a lesser extent, Noah Short, T-Rob were getting looks. It was not a particularly deep wide receiver core in terms of the number of passes, the number of catches, but I'll be curious to see how the offense looks this year. One, obviously, big theme tonight. Who's the quarterback? What's their skill set going to be? Replacing giant shoes, yada, yada. But the other thing is something that that still sticks in the back of my head was seeing in the Army-Navy game, Navy run basically it was like a somebody who knows more about football could describe it better than I could. But effectively, it was a fake option that was a screen pass that went big. And one thing that I've always felt is that we could be doing a better job of utilizing our running backs and honestly, our slot backs out of the backfield for passing. So, like last year, we saw almost no 3 wide receiver sets. I could see that happening again. I could see, definitely 1 tight end on the field, sometimes 2 tight ends, big packages. And, I think the wide receiver core, if you want to talk about a wide open running back room or a wide open quarterback room, I think the wide receiving room, it's anybody. I don't see our offense being heavily dependent on pass plays next year. I think the departure of Thatcher at the end of 23 really sort of, I don't want to say shut the door on that, but we're just going to have to see.
Yeah.
I want to go back to the tight end for a second. I'm looking at the roster here. And these tight ends, the size of these guys are unusual for West Point. We have, 6'3", 6'5", 6'6", 6'3". These are all sophomores, by the way. 6'7", 6'5", all sophomores. 6'4", 6'3". These are big guys by West Point standards for tight end. Now, I don't know about the quality and how good they are. I hope they're good. But wow, that's pretty big for a tight end at West Point.
Well, they bring those tight ends to it. Sometimes there's position flexibility where you could be a Brett Toth who came in as a tight end and moved to tackle. They give that position flexibility. Army's bringing in a recruit that I wrote about, Reggie Kelly, who's 6'7" and 220 as a tight end prospect. The guy's never played tight end in his life, I don't think.
What did he play?
He played like an edge guy on defense, and was a pretty good defensive player, but they see him as a tight end prospect. Now, does that mean Reggie Kelly will be playing tight end his first spring with his first preseason practice with Army? Who knows? They bring the guys in based on what they can project them out to, some position flexibility. There's been multiple times. Why am I blanking on the guy's name? I'm sorry. He was a offensive lineman who played tackle, David, and they moved him to tight end a little bit a couple of years ago. So, there's a lot of flexibility there. You're an extra blocker sometimes as a tight end. Sometimes there's a lot of position flexibility. Josh Menike is the guy who I wanted to talk about, who is a freshman this year. He's out of Illinois. He was pretty highly regarded by Monk and his staff. The dude is 6'7", 292 pounds. As a freshman. So I think he's a guy that could be looked at as a tackle prospect in that mix. We forgot to mention Lane Parks. Apologies. Lane Parks was basically the second string center last year. Sometimes those guys like a Bill Katsianis can move to play guard, right? Brady Small's not moving out of center. He's not. Brady Smalls might be the best center that Army's ever had in the last, who knows, since definitely going back to Bryce Holland, maybe even better.
Johnson Clark, All-American, 1966 center.
Yeah, we're not going that far, Seth. Ron Rice was probably in that mix. That's another guy. Lane Parks. Lane Parks is in the mix too. Jeff Generelli said you guys made a great point. Blocking at the receiver position is so important to this offense. Absolutely. Some of those tight ends have tackle in their future. Absolutely, Christian. They'll bring in those guys. You'll see some 6'7" guys. You'll see some 6'6" guys. They'll bring them in at tight end and they'll move them around a little bit, and we'll see what happens. So, anything else you want to say?
Practice is about. That's what spring practice is about. Is to see who where your holes are. And we know quarterback. We know there's a couple of slots at the offensive line. Of course, there's some in defense. Who can make the difference? And this is what Monken and his team is going to be looking for. I think this is what makes him a good coach, too, is he takes raw talent and he moves them around. He develops them, him being him and his team. It's not just him. They develop them, and then they move them around. Noah Short, again, is a great example of it. Bryson Daly, 2 years ago, we didn't think it was anything when he was a sophomore, 2.5 years ago.
Bryson Daly was a good player. Bryson Daly's sophomore year got into games in the fourth quarter and turned out some long touchdown runs.
Okay, but he wasn't what we thought he was going to be.
So, no, do we think he was going to set the NCAA record in touchdowns in the season for quarterbacks? Maybe not, but he was highly thought of. So just be careful sometimes. Okay. Anything else you'd like to add with the offense, guys, before we go to defense?
I got nothing else.
I'm good.
Okay. So it's kind of reversed this year, right? last year we weren't sure what Army would have on defense. I think they lost. They only had 3 starters coming back last year. So I don't know if we found a lot about the defense in the spring, but we certainly found out maybe more in the fall. Casey Larkin was going to play the kind of hybrid patchy position at the beginning of the year. There was an injury to Steve Nadozi, and Casey Larkin slotted to safety, and Casey Larkin had a really great season at safety along with Max DiDomenico. So you never know what's going to happen. Like spring, again, Seth, you're right. You're going to see who you have. See, to be honest, probably not a lot of people want to hear this, but spring is also kind of, some of these guys are fighting for their jobs. Some of these freshmen are fighting for their jobs. They're not getting paid position. They're fighting for their position on the roster, because Army's going to bring in another 70 to 80 freshmen in the summer, in the preseason, right? They're not going to keep like all these other freshmen are going to be fighting for positions. They'll be fighting to move up the depth chart. They're going to be fighting for roster spots, to be honest. This is a time where the coaching staff will have to let some players go, probably. They'll have to make some tough calls and make some players go, because you just can't have 175 man roster. You just can't. So that's something. There's Christian's comment. My fault. That's something to think of too. But last year we were wondering what are they going to do on defense, and they ended up having one of the best defenses in the country statistically in some categories. I mean, it's crazy. And now the experience they have back on defense, I think there's less holes to fill on the defensive side of the ball, right? I mean, Max DiDomenico, safety, 3-year starter, huge loss. Kyle Lewis, 2-year starter, huge loss. Chance Keith stepped up and played that Apache position pretty darn well for a 1-year starter. Big loss, big loss. I'm trying to think of who else they lost along. Cody Weineker was a senior that was playing a lot of nose tackle at the end of the season. That's a loss in leadership, a loss in play on the field too. But other than that, I mean, they're pretty well intact on the defensive side of the ball. What do you think, Cuthbert?
Well, the 4 people you just named, Lewis, DiDomenico, Keith, and Winokur, those are the 4. Those are. I don't want to say the only people we're losing, but in terms of like the people who are really getting a lot of snaps, who are getting a lot of playing time, that's really all we're losing. Now, a year ago, we were sitting here going, what are we going to do on defense? Because a year ago, I think we only had 3 or 4 starters, maybe those guys. Now, of those 4, 3 of them were team captains. Now, every time you lose a senior, you lose leadership, but 3 of them were team captains. And, that's a big loss. And now we're in this 180-degree switch from where we were, a year ago, where we were so pleasantly surprised and so impressed with how strong the defense was. And, we get Nate Woody back as the DC. That's fantastic. We're losing Sean Cronin, who was a defensive line coach.
He did a good job.
But we did, we're getting Romero back, and we're getting John Luce, Mike Vitti. So, he's offensive line.
Yeah, Romero's offensive coach too. I mean,
I thought he was the defensive backs.
No, he's slot backs. Verpail is the safeties coach, and Daryl Dixon, who's been around for a while, who's a great corners coach, and then you got Coach Juice too in there.
Right. Yeah. Well, and so.
Yeah,
so now we're in this, but we're in this opposite position where instead of only bringing back 3 or 4 people, who are starters, who have significant experience, now, Cody Harris Miller, was on the broadcast, fantastic. Jake Latour, Elo Medozi, Caleb Fortner, Andon Thomas, Jaden Mays, Casey Larkin, Donovan Platt. It's on and on and on. We have this glut of returning experience, and as someone like y'all who lived through the bad times, who lived through what it was like in the late 99s, early 2000s, I am terrified of high expectations. I wish I wasn't, but I am. And so I look at this returning defense. I look at the staff we're bringing back. I look at the players we're bringing back. And I'm thinking to myself, we can really do something again here on defense.
Yeah.
It frightens me, but I'm also incredibly excited about it because there is so much experience coming back and how well we did this year, admittedly with, I think, an easier schedule in 24 than we're going to see in 25. So, we're just going to have to see how it all pans out. But I think we could have another banner year on defense.
Yeah, real quick, Seth, before and I want you to answer a question too in a little bit about that Christian had.
I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah, but let's hold up on that first. Let's keep on talking. One guy who I forgot that's a graduating senior who had a big impact on the team is Brett Jarena. Brett Jarena was a special teams ace. He was the third linebacker on the inside, emotional guy. Made some pretty big plays. Brett Jarena's loss because he was a situational guy a lot on third down that would pressure the quarterback. Brett Jarena, and a little bit of news here. Brett Jarena is actually going to be one of 4 Army players that's going to participate in the Army Pro Day later next month. So Brett Jarena's a guy. Defensive line. Just a defense coming back, and a guy who that I mentioned earlier that's going to should have an impact this year, Steve Nadozie. Steve Nadozie was going to be their starting safety before an injury, like right toward the end of preseason last year. He's going to be a junior. Could he pair with Casey Larkin as the other safety? Maybe he can. Maybe Gavin Shields could be that guy. When Gavin Shields was on the field, Gavin Shields made some plays as an extra safety for Army. Gavin Shields is a guy who seemed to be always around the ball. So Gavin Shields is a guy. Safety, the corners are pretty locked good, right? The corners, they're looking pretty good with experience. Eric Ford's a guy, too, who shared time with Ella McDozie at the edge position. Can you get them on the field together? Who knows? Maybe they can find a way to get Ella McDozie and Eric Ford on the field together. Maybe Eric Ford goes to defensive line, rushes the passer every once in a while with Ella on the field. I don't know. But Seth, your thoughts on defense?
The same thing you guys just said. I think the defense comes back healthy and more experienced than obviously last year when we had 4 guys back and we were all nervous. We thought Army was going to be winning games 68-66, and it didn't happen that way. On paper and with experience, this looks like a very solid defense. Again, they're filling holes with people. They're moving people around. This is what Monken does. So I expect to see a couple of new guys. Every year we see somebody new pop up out of nowhere. And 2 years before he was nothing, or he was a freshman who was just sitting there waiting around, and then suddenly his junior year he's a starter, and senior year he's all East or something like that or close to it. I expect to see more of that. And this is what Army does. And this is what Army has to do, to be honest, because the people they're getting in there, they got to go out there and get some raw talent and build them up over those 4 years. We'll lead into the question about the 105-man roster in a second, but it's going to become a little bit harder now with schools raising their rosters by 20 people per school if they want to. So you have to do this, and this is what Army does great. Hey, the prep school helps too. You get an extra year. It's a red shirt year, kind of. These kids don't have to stay, but for the ones who do stay, it's a red shirt year of development. They get a year older, they get bigger, they're stronger, and they get to understand the Army system. Because I'm sure Monken is involved in that. We all know he is. To help the prep school coaches. So the bottom line is that I see a solid defense this year, with holes being filled by people we probably don't think much of at this point. We don't know them that well yet.
We'll see. I wanted to bring up a guy who I think is going to get in the mix on the defensive line, a guy who certainly looks the part. He was traveling with the team last year. He was getting into games here and there. Javon Smith, he's a defensive end. He's going to be a sophomore. You see some weight room clips on this guy. He's going to be a factor on the defensive line, I believe. Matt Gemma is a guy who also toward the end of the year when they were banged up at nose tackle, he got some reps in. He got some live game reps in as a freshman. He's going to be in the mix with Cody Harris-Miller on that nose tackle position. Jacob Tuioti is a guy we don't talk a lot about, but he was like a top 4 or 5 rotation guy at times for Army last year on the defensive line. They're going to stick with the rotation. Whoever their new defensive coach is, he's already in the building. We'll find out probably this week who he is. They're going to probably stick with that rotation on defense where they play 6 or 7 guys a game, keep them fresh. And so Javon Smith and Matt Gemma should be in the mix there. Let's see. Jeff Generelli says, looks great in the weight room. I think he's talking about Javon Smith. I mean, he could be really good at Army. He could be really a special defensive end. I don't know if we'll see. That's a guy who, if I'm watching this spring and he's participating in spring practice, that's a guy who I want to watch some reps on, because I think he can make this defense even better. So, anybody else we want to, yeah, thank you, Jeff. Anything else we want to bring to the table on the defensive side of the ball? Oh, we didn't talk about Andon Thomas and Caleb Fortner. Come on. I mean, those are going to be your captains this year, right? I mean, those two guys led your team in tackles. Andon Thomas had an amazing season for a first-year starter. Caleb will be entering his 3rd year as a starter. Wow. I mean, those two guys are what you want as Army inside linebackers. If Steve Anderson was here, he would be saying the same thing. The way they play, the motors that they play with, to have both of your inside linebackers with returning starting experience coming back at their level, that's a pretty good pairing, no doubt.
Absolutely right. That's a great way to start.
I think we have a glut of talent on the defensive side, and I think you could take your pick for captains. You know what I mean? I think there's a lot of experience, there's a lot of leadership there, and it's, you know what, the defense is looking like this year. It's with any luck, it will be as good as advertised, because looking at what we have, I mean, the future is bright, bright, bright.
Yeah, I wanted to mention, now I'm thinking of, I'll get into an offensive player that I forgot about. Well, didn't mention earlier. Justin Weaver is like the 3rd corner. He could even be the 2nd corner in here. There's a battle between like Donovan Platt, Jaden Mays, and Justin Weaver probably every practice. Who's going to get the most pass defenses? Who's going to get the most picks in practice, or who's going to get the most knockdowns in the week? So Justin Weaver is basically they got 1 A, B, and C as starting corners for Army there. So that's good to see. And they also have Jackson Hammond. Jackson Hammond is a guy who's going to be a junior. He's a speed track guy. He was in the depth chart earlier in the year. So he's a guy maybe to watch out for. You know, I mean, he's a guy that, I mean, like you said, Seth, sometimes there's these guys that come out and, you know, sometimes during the season, you know, injuries might force a guy into action, or, you know, might force a guy into like the first time playing. It's hard for me to bring this up. I will bring it up. Elijah Riley, when Elijah Riley got to play because of Brandon Jackson's unfortunate passing, he got thrown into the mix right away, and he ended up being a 4-year starter for Army and an NFL player. You know, they knew what they had with Elijah Riley, but, you know, things happen. So, yeah, we'll see there. Anything, anybody you were missing? I know on the inside, you know, there's some young guys to back up, like not young guys. Noah Nixon's there for Caleb Fortner and Thomas. Baylor Newsome is a guy on the inside too, maybe to keep an eye on guys who got some playing time, you know, in that secondary role for Army last year. So we'll see. Man, it's like you said, Cuthbert, it's nice to have like some names that, you know, that you certainly recognize, names that have been like that have received some all conference, you know, notice or honors, and they're going to lean on the defense maybe toward the beginning of the season a little bit, right? Maybe not versus Tarleton State, but Kansas, when you go into Kansas State, lean on the defense a little bit in that game, you know? So, yeah, we'll see. Guys, appreciate you watching. We're going to get to special teams in a second, but if you're leaving comments and if you're watching us on YouTube, you can leave us a super chat or a super sticker that supports Black Knight Nation. We really appreciate it. If you check out Black Knight Nation's website, I just wrote a story on Sam Tilson, a freshman Army women's basketball player that had her career day yesterday. She scored 35 points the whole season. Before yesterday, she had 17 points and led Army in scoring, and they beat Bucknell in a pretty key game. I'll tell you, watching the women's basketball team, Seth, I don't know. Could they cut down the nets this year? They're going to be right.
Absolutely.
They're
They're
going to
right
be right
there.
in the mix. The men are too inconsistent for me. The men are too inconsistent for me. They laid an egg today at Bucknell, but the women's basketball team, Missy Traversi, it's pretty impressive to watch them. They get after it. They have a 5'9" girl that's not keeping balls alive. Brooke Wilson grabbing 7 rebounds in the game yesterday. Pretty impressive off the bench. Really fun to watch. Let's get to special teams. Kicking. I just realized before the podcast that kicking's a wide open position this year because Trey Granati was a senior and Trey Granati did the kicking. He was really good he's really had a nice year for Army, and he graduated. He had to assume the kickoff duties too when Anderson Britton tore his ACL early last season. I'm not sure the timetable on Anderson Britton. I know we won't probably see him in the spring. He's not going to be kicking in the spring. So we'll see if he can get back for preseason. But Dawson Jones is a freshman who got some kickoffs in later in the season. He probably kicked an extra point or two in the fourth quarter of games. And you have Charlie Barnett, who's been on the team. He's going to be a senior. I watched Charlie in practice. He looks pretty good. He looks pretty. I watch him like in warmups. I mean, maybe it's Charlie's time to take over the kicking duties. We'll see. Maybe there'll be a competition between him and Dawson, and not competition, but in the spring, find a little bit more out about those players. I mean, they're gonna need some solid kicking there. I don't know. Trey Granati was pretty good for them for being a first year starter. What do you guys?
They did a great job. Great job.
I was very impressed with Trey Granati, especially stepping in after Anderson got injured and sort of, pulling double duty like that. The long and the short is Army does not have a long and storied history of quality, accurate field goal kickers. And then along came Quinn Moretzky. And at the moment, I think kickers are still sort of living in that shadow. With any luck, we can find Quinn Moretzky 2.0, somebody who's Mr. Reliable, who we can trot out there anywhere from 20 yards to 45 yards. And we have reasonable assurance, confidence that he's going to be able to get us those points. Like so much in Army football, we're just going to have to kind of see how it goes. The coaches, they're going to identify who they like, who they've got confidence in, and we'll go from there. Unfortunately, I can't go 2, 3, 4 deep on the kickers.
No.
But I trust Sertonio. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm trying to think of, like, you got Barnett and you got Dawson Jones, and I'm trying to think who else might even be on the roster right now. They probably got a kid at prep school. They're probably bringing in a couple freshmen through the freshman class. Punter James Wagonseller was pretty consistent for his first year. I mean, he was pretty solid. You didn't really notice. If you don't notice the punter a lot, then he's doing the right job. They're not punting a lot, right, Army? They're going for it a lot on fourth down, but when he had a punt, I mean, for the most part, he was pretty good for a first-year punter. And you still have Cooper Allen on the team who punted 2 years ago, right? So I mean, you have some experience there. Got to feel pretty good about punting on special teams. And like you said, Cuthbert with Saturnio, he's one of the best special team coaches in the country. So I mean, that's a plus there too. So
I'm genuinely surprised we've been able to hold on to Coach Saturnio. Just what he's been able to do year in, year out. With the, we all understand the limitations of Army's ability to recruit the type of students that we can attract, the type of students who can meet the high level of qualifications, who can maintain as cadets. And, let alone you're talking about special teams, it's getting even more specialized, higher levels of difficulty to achieve and maintain success. I couldn't be more impressed with him as a positions coach, and I'm amazed that he's still with us, but couldn't be happier.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I think that the reason why maybe Coach Saturnio, I mean, him and Coach Monken are really close. I don't think he's leaving Coach Monken's side, to be honest with you. I mean, unless the Hawaii head coach opening, opens up and he gets interviewed for that. I think that might be the only thing that might prevent Coach Saturnio from leaving. But I don't know if you saw that feature on him and his brother Joe that I think ESPN did.
It was a great feature.
Oh my God. I mean, Amazing person. Just we've had Coach Turner on the podcast. Just one of a kind. So I mean, great coach, great person, great mentor. Just yeah. So I don't think that's happening. Bryson Jose is also a kicker on the roster. His brother was a punter holder for Army a few years back. So we'll see. Maybe he's going to get some chances to kick. When you have 3 guys on the spring roster, you're going to kick a lot. You do kickoffs, and you're going to be involved in the scrimmages and that kind of stuff. So I guess that's we went through the roster real quick. We threw some names out there, a lot of names out there. I didn't know which way this was going to go. A couple guys that I just wanted to mention that maybe I went up and down the roster, just that are going to factor in. Some of the guys are a little bit veteran guys. So, but Jarrell Dixon did not play last year. He's a running back that did not play. He was with the team. He was, I think, a scout team player, but he was working on his academics, and he's going to be back this year. And Jarrell Dixon is a guy who has career carries for Army. Does he have, 50 career carries for Army? I don't think so, but he has game experience, and maybe he's a guy who gets into that fullback mix. Maybe he's a guy who helps out at slot back. I think he could kind of be a combination guy. And when I talked to him for a story about him and his value to the scout team, you could really see that there was a fire in him to get back on the field and help this team. So with not being a scout, so I think that Jarrell Dixon is a guy who could be in the mix. I see AJ Williams on the roster too. He's a veteran guy who's played fullback. They're gonna have some guys. Fullback, they have guys with experience. They have guys there. Somebody's gonna have to, read Radina, and then who's gonna be number 3? We'll see. Let's see. Owen Walter, long snapper. How can we forget Owen Walter? A sophomore, his first year on the team first year starting on the team, and he did an incredible job. I mean, no, I don't remember too many issues with the snaps on punts or kicks in 2024. Do you, Seth?
No, not at all. Not one. I don't think. Do we?
Nah, Jeff. Thanks for bringing that up. We appreciate it. Always
solid player. Solid player. That's what you need. Guys who don't make mistakes.
I think he made a couple tackles. He was involved in some tackles downfield too. We don't want to get into schedules yet, guys. We're not going to go to any predictions, or anything like that. But I just want to,
Let me just say one thing about the schedule, if I might, because I'm looking at it.
Oh, no.
Sorry. Army plays Charlotte, Temple, and Tulsa at home. 3 of the worst teams in the league last year, and who knows about this year, and North Texas is the 4th one. They have a tough road schedule. East Carolina is improving. Tulane is always good. UTSA is always pretty decent, though we beat them we beat them last year. And UAB, not so much. We're not playing South Florida. We're not playing Rice, which is these are middle road teams. And we're not playing, and of course, Memphis, which is the best team in the league, according to, they're projected to be number 1. We'll see if Army and Navy might have something to say about that. So the schedule seems to be a little bit tougher than last year, but the thing I don't like to see is that some of the better teams are on the road, Tulane and East Carolina in particular. So that is and UTSA. That's going to be something pretty interesting. I mean, the schedule. These teams are all losing a lot of guys. Every team in the league, with the exception of Army and Navy, lose a lot of transfers. We don't. And we have to see how that plays out. Who gets guys, who doesn't, who loses guys. Tulane lost its quarterback. So we'll see how that plays out. But it's an interesting schedule. It's a little bit tougher than last year on paper.
Yeah, well, Army was gifted that schedule. Let's be honest. They were gifted an easy schedule in their first year in the AAC. I don't know if they took over Rice's. I mean, it was a gift. They didn't play Tulane. They got to play Tulane in the conference championship, but they were given a pretty easy schedule. So let's see how they do against a better schedule. We'll talk about that. Somebody
mentioned something about the rosters, 105-man roster.
It doesn't. I don't think it service academies deal with that. Jeff
They don't.
generally said they
They
don't.
don't. That's my answer to that is that they did this to help the bigger teams because they can afford 105 players on their roster, give scholarships.
Yeah.
Scholarships. So the teams in the Big Ten and the SEC and whatnot will be able to fill those rosters. Some of the small schools won't be able to afford it. But it doesn't affect the service academies because everybody at these schools are on scholarship. You don't pay to go to school at any of the academies, and so you can play as many people as you want. At home, certainly you can dress everybody. On the road, you have some requirements. You can't take everybody on the road.
Yeah. Real quick with the I didn't want to talk about this that much, but Seth, you got me. AAC, right? It's a conference. It's a conference where the transfer portal for quarterbacks, I mean, guys are coming and going. I think Kurt Warner's son, EJ Warner, went out on the West Coast somewhere. I don't even know where he went. I don't even know. He's not at Rice anymore. And, it's the quarterback play is not even average at best with some of these guys. You look at the Tulane quarterback, he was okay, but maybe the conditions affected him a little bit. At the end, he wanted nothing to do with being in the game and that, playing against Army's defense. And now I think he went to Duke. I think that's where the Tulane.
He's at Duke. He went to Duke. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was reported he got some insane NIL money. I don't know how much I believe it. He's a very talented quarterback.
He's a good athlete,
But I will say next year's schedule, you hit the nail on the head. It's obviously going to be much more difficult on the road than it will be at home. I see our floor at 7. Obviously, come August, I'll have different takes on everything. But I see our floor at 7. And I definitely am I'm bought in wholesale to the, I don't want to say curse of the AAC championship, but the more I reflect on this past season, and Navy was a fantastic team. Navy was a very, very good team. I don't want to take anything away from them, but you can't tell me that Navy and Army were coming into that game, on the same page with the same amount of rest, being able to devote the same amount of energy and time into their game plan. And I'm thinking about that because I'm looking at next year's schedule. I do think the floor is 7, but it's not impossible that we couldn't have another similar 2014-ish season. Obviously, Kansas State, obviously Tulane. These are difficult games. But apart from that, I'm not saying they're all going to be walkovers. I think they're all winnable. You know what I mean? UTSA, we've had their number quite a bit recently. Obviously, luck runs out eventually. ECU's on the rise. Tulsa has a new head coach, Trey Lamb. He's had success. But I think, Temple is hot garbage. I loved Biff Posey, but Charlotte, they're obviously
he's gone, isn't he?
Yeah. I really liked him, but they got rid of him, which I thought was too bad. But they're not coming back anytime soon. North Texas had that incredible offense we were able to shut down. They lost their quarterback. They lost Sheffield. They lost their star center. So we could have another big one next year, guys. And I'd love to hoist the AAC championship again. I would hate to do it, only then to fall to the boat school a week later. So I don't know. All discussions for another day that I'm trying to squeeze.
I'll say this, and I'll be quiet after this. The AAC is the best conference that Army could have found because of the NIL and the transfer portal. Because, again, Army and Navy, they're not losing a lot of players every year. We lost Kanye, of course. These other schools, like you guys have just mentioned, they're losing. If these guys are decent and they're juniors or sophomores, they're going someplace else. Yes, they're getting other players from other leagues. They're probably rating the Conference USA best players and maybe even the MAC conference, but it's not the same quality. So as this goes on, we're going to see that Army and Navy are perfectly positioned in this league in football because of the transfer portal.
I think we also, and this is true for Navy and Air Force as well, I think we have the advantage of cohesion. This is something I've talked about on Twitter quite a bit. Between the transfer portal, guys sitting out, people coming in, the rosters are rolling over with such frequency that you still have these elite athletes, but you're completely your team cohesion. I'm not saying it's impossible for a team to come together, but it's a little bit trickier. And you start looking at service academies, and you've got guys who've been there for 2, 3, 4 years. You know what I mean? Especially at a place like Army, where when you're a freshman, if you're good enough to be on the team, you know, you're getting told, look, you stick with it. You're getting snaps in a year. You're getting serious playing time in 2 years. And as a senior, you're going to be a starter. You know, we are able to basically manufacture that because of the style of school we are. And, you know, exactly. You look at a place like Tulane and it's like, well, their quarterback left and their running back left. Thankfully, their coach stayed. There was quite a bit of discussion that he was going to go somewhere. He decided not to. Thank goodness for their fan base. With all that turnover, I think we're positioned absolutely perfectly where we need to be. And I think we're going to be able to compete.
Let me throw one more thing out in that regard.
Please don't. Please don't. No, go ahead, Seth. Please do.
Good. Okay. What stops a kid from having 6 or 7 good games early in the season and then saying, because he has an agent, saying, you know what, I'm going to take, my agent's made contact with other schools. I'm going to take it easy the last 4 or 5 games, not get injured, so I can get that payday at the end of the year.
Who are we talking about?
A kid transferring, not Army, someplace else.
It's like the Matt Slumka. I mean, at UNLV. Now, admittedly, that was in theory about NIL money that had been promised that wasn't getting paid. But Seth, you're exactly right. Where it's like, oh, look at, you know, you think about what was his name, Kenny Hill, you know, at Texas A&M a decade ago, close to it. And he came out the gate with 5 or 6 incredible games and 500 yards passing, and they were 5-0, a number, whatever it was in the country. If you're able to do that at a smaller school, what's to stop you from going, hey guys, I can't get injured here. I can walk into a couple $1 million next year at a P5 or P4 or whatever it is now, you know?
And that doesn't take place at the academies because these kids, once they're juniors, they can't leave. So it's very interesting.
Okay, Seth, enough.
Sorry,
keep going.
This is just college football. That's all.
Dude, I lost 15% on my laptop of power for that conversation.
Okay.
It drained it.
Brings up another question.
5 minutes.
I don't think it's happening.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm ready to go to the third level of our 50-50 games next year and what I think we're going to do in terms of winning and losing, Sal. So you just key me up and let's go.
Yeah,
let's keep it going, baby. It's Army football. I've been missing this. Let's keep it going.
Let's get back here maybe in a couple weeks. Seth will see a spring. I'm not sure what the spring practice schedule is. I think they might go this week and then have spring break's going to creep up on them soon. So I don't know if they're I'm going to try to hit a weekend practice if I can, like a Saturday scrimmage type thing. My schedule is pretty busy during the week, but I like to get to them. Maybe after I see one and Seth sees a couple, we'll come back here, give you our observations, maybe have some interviews with players that we could pop up there too. Seth, I'm sure will write some good feature stories. I'll try to pop in with one here and there too. We'll keep you guys posted. We won't say we're going to give you everything for spring football, but we'll do the most we can. And usually we'll try to provide you with the best possible coverage you can get. With also the other sports too. Seth's doing a good job following the men's lacrosse team, who's on a roll to start the season. They're 4-0, right, Seth? 4-0. Like I said, I reported on the women's basketball team. I'm going to write about the hockey team, who is in the Atlantic Hockey Playoffs as the 5th seed. Yeah, so we'll have you covered. We'll do what we can here. And guys, like I said,
and the swim team just won the Patriot League for the first time ever. Was it?
I don't know. You got that.
It's a good time to be an Army sports fan, guys. It's a good time to be an Army sports fan, up and down.
We didn't talk about Army's new AD, Ted Theodakis. I believe, is that the correct pronunciation? Theodakis. Sorry, Theo. Apologize for the pronunciation. I bumped into him yesterday at the women's basketball game. Just had a quick conversation with him. Very approachable guy. So we look forward to working potentially down the road with Theo too. So we could talk about that on another podcast if you want to. We could do.
It was good they hired from within, and he's a nice guy. So let's see what he can do. And he's got a lot going on. There's a lot of different teams at West Point besides.
And you know the athletic director raised some money. So real quick, let's get to Christians, and then we got to get out because I think my computer is going to shut off on me, and I don't trust Seth to close on this podcast. Cuthbert, you got back.
I've been very quiet today.
Cuthbert, you got backup. So big picture question: with rumored move to 16-team playoff, the models I've seen has an automatic G5 bid and a few extra at-large bids. Seems like this would help Army's chances to sneak in the college football playoff. You got to win the conference. I think that you're going to have to. I don't think two teams from the AAC pending maybe. I know that every school is going to make their pitch when it comes down to the end of the season. Like Memphis is going to say, we belong. Navy's going to say, we belong from last year. Tulane's going to say, what about us? And I think, Army's the conference champion. They didn't get in. So, let's work on getting one AAC team in, right? And we'll see if the 16 team.
I don't think
16 teams, they're not taking two from the AAC.
Well, I don't think they're going to take more than one G5 team, even at 16. I don't think they're going to go to 16 because the concern is that some of these better teams will start taking it easy late in the year when they know they have it locked up. 16 teams is a lot. If you have 14 or 15, automatic and qualified and at-large teams getting in, a team like Alabama or Georgia, or, the best Michigan, Ohio State, they might start sitting some of their better players with 2 or 3 games left, as opposed to maybe 1 game left. You can start doing that. I think they're going to stay with 12, and I think they're going to stay with 1 G5 automatic bid, and that means. And the question is, where does the Big Ten, whatever it's going to be called, the Big Ten, the Big 8, whatever we're going to call it. I'm sorry, the Pac-10, or the Pac-8, whatever they call it.
Who cares?
What do they?
I don't care.
They might take the spot, though. They might take the spot.
Yeah.
They're considered a G5 team.
We'll see.
Well, ultimately, it's going to come down to your ability to win the conference and to also be the highest ranked. If they go to a 16, there's no way in hell that they're going to do an automatic qualifier for all the G5s, because it would be awesome if they did that, which is why they never will do it. The only way Army's getting into the playoff is they got to win the conference like they did last year, and they got to hope that there's no Boise State sitting there or some other team from another conference. You know what I mean? I think that's going to be Army's only shot. There is a shot, though. I don't think it's impossible, but I think that's all we can hang our hat on.
We'll see. Guys, thanks so much for joining us. We have over 450 people that have watched us at some point tonight, I believe. So I really appreciate that. Check out Black Knight Nation stories on the other Army sports. Seth's going to start cranking out stories as Thursday. Spring practice starts for the Black Knights. Don't have a time yet. We'll get that tomorrow. Get their schedule up. We'll try to get their schedule up on Black Knight Nation once it gets finalized. And real quick note, potential podcasting note. Hoping to have Coach Jeff Monken on the Black Knight Nation podcast at 11:45 Tuesday morning. So, guys, mark that down if you're watching this. Hoping to have him working things out still, but looking pretty good for Tuesday at 11:45. And Coach can really preview, set us. We are just guys coming back here left and right. We can talk more about the quarterback situation with Coach Monken. We could talk about the offensive line with Coach Monken. We could talk about how he feels about this team in general heading into the spring. Maybe guys who might be not participating in spring practice because they're a little banged up or getting some surgeries. We can talk about. Maybe he'll talk about that. He probably won't. But we'll see what we can do. But check out our blackknightnation.com. Also, give us a like if you're watching on YouTube. Subscribe to us on YouTube. We really appreciate that. It helps us getting our stuff out. And I'm going to put some stuff up on the hockey and the basketball on the shorts. Check out that on our YouTube channel and our Instagram too. Black_Knight_Nation on Instagram. Really appreciate it. Cuthbert, thanks for joining us tonight. As always, appreciate it. Seth, doing a bang up job there. Really appreciate it. And guys, we'll be back soon on the Black Knight Nation podcast. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.